Hey guys, this is GWS here for an update on the macro side of things for the probably nobody who cares right now, except for me. But this is fun for me anyhow. Plus, kind of holds me accountable, so I'm gonna keep posting these updates and just to let people know, like anybody who does care, that I'm still into this. Yesterday I uploaded a video talking about um, a macro based style of programming in terms of machine learning, and I've at least got the basic macro structure down. I haven't got any AI components, um, but this is the initial makings of the macro system. Of course, I have the RAM range here. I got a few globals. I got all this. A lot of my this time was also spent brushing up on Lua because it's a scripting language, and I'm more used to object-oriented stuff. This is more like a JavaScript, but anyhow, it's another subject. Um, Anyhow, let's kind of get into the components of this. So we got three different classes that I'm molding here, which is probably going to morph into more, but right now we got three. We have RAM ranges, which I want to do separate from the macros, because see, what I want to do is, and I'm still kind of brainstorming how I want to do this, but initially I want the game to just randomly set up a bunch of macros. Like when you load the script from the BizHawk script editor, when you load this, um, eventually we're going to have save files and all that, and we'll probably have a GUI too, but anyhow, another time. Um, like when this is initially loaded, what it's going to do is it's going to generate a bunch of random macros. Um, and then after it generates all the macros, um, it's going to create different RAM range rules until it comes up with one that satisfies the current conditions. And then when that happens, um, it will it will start running a macro. But see, eventually it's going to get to the point where, like, you create ranges, and what it's going to do is, like, each range is going to give a macro a score. Like, if, say, you fall within address 25 to 30, for example. As you can see, I have a start and end and a sector here and a byte width, which may or may not be used. I don't know how I'm going to use all that. It's just framework right now. But anyhow, as I was saying, the way it's going to work is if it falls within a certain range, the macro to be loaded um, will get a score. And basically, the macro that gets the highest score, i.e., satisfies the most RAM conditions, is going to be loaded. And the way I want to do the reinforcement, at least the way I'm thinking of, is because this is supervised reinforcement, what it'll be is if you score their performance negatively based on your own observations of their gameplay, it will handicap that particular RAM range, or there will be a handicap put on that macro. And so that macro will less likely be the function that's loaded. Um, and here's kind of the macro structure right here. It needs to be more fleshed out than this, and we got to add AI components. But we have, a length, and basically the length here is the number of frames total that this macro will run, and then it has an array of held buttons, which will be like, the way it's going to be is like within that 100 frames, the button will initially be pressed at whatever frame S frame is, and then E frame will be when it stops, and that'll be within the 100 frames. And see, that's all going to be decided because we have S time and duration here. These are going to be random. This is just meant to kind of scale with it. Like S time, for example, will go off of a percentage of the total frame length. So, like, say it hits the S time is 0.5 and it's 100 frames, then the S time will be on frame 50, and eventually I'm gonna function that in, if not just write a little bit of code below all this just to create the start and end frame. And so that's the way all that's gonna work. And so and then you can have a series of buttons, because of course, like, if you want to run, for example, you have to be holding forward, Y, and then you push A if you want to do a running jump, or B if you want to do a running spin jump and get that extra distance. So you need to be able to hold multiple buttons at one time, or like certain combinations. Like, of course, you're not gonna jump right away when you're running. And in terms of the interrupts, as I was explaining yesterday, the interrupts, I'm hoping that everything could be handled inside of the macros themselves. Like, if I'm setting a weight on which macro is going to run, say you're approaching a Goomba or a Koopa, like, as you get closer, I'm hoping that through reinforcement, you'll be able to get it to the point where a macro will just, like, have some kind of short jump command, like some kind of 20 frame jump command that will jump ahead in priority. But if I do need to add interrupts, what I'm actually thinking, because yesterday when I was thinking of doing interrupts between the macros, which, to refresh, an interrupt would be if a RAM address hits this point, it jumps out of running the macro and it runs the interrupt. And I was thinking of doing the interrupt as something equal in length, but what I'm really thinking now is, if we're going to run interrupts, it's going to be a single button press and hold for X amount of frames. And then you return to execution of the macro, or you return, to the macro controller, right? So, I can either do that, or I can do continuous frame checking, which, I mean, with a reward system that might be good. I don't know. Like, if you're checking every frame and then it's constantly switching out of running the function, out of running the macro, and jumping into a new one, I don't know if that's going to help with overall fitness. But anyhow, I just want to make a short little video just to document my progress, hold myself accountable, and hopefully people will be interested in this in the future, and hopefully somebody will be able to take this garbage code, which will expand as time goes on, and turn it into something that can be usable. Right now, I'm in the process of just testing the system right now. Like, when I return to programming in a couple hours or so, I want to create something that just continuously runs and jumps. And then within this while true, we will just continuously run that macro. And the way it's going to work too is there'll be a little frame counter in here, and then it'll compare it to the length of the macro, and then it'll it'll execute the next macro, like if the frame count is over, um, and then that'll be like where all the joysticks will be set at and all that. So anyhow, that's where I'm at right now. Thanks for listening, and God bless.